Have you ever spent just hours, and I mean absolute hours, studying something?
Oh, the endless color-coded notes.
Right. You memorize every single rule.
Yeah.
You take those notes and you feel entirely prepared. I will never forget, a few years ago, I took a trip to Paris.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I spent months drilling French vocabulary into my brain. I had the flashcards. I knew the grammar. I was ready.
Or so you thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I walk into this tiny cafe, step up to the counter, and the barista asks me a question at a totally normal conversational speed.
And let me guess.
My brain just completely flatlined.
Yeah.
I just stood there staring at her, completely panicked, and eventually I think I just pointed at a croissant and mumbled something incoherent.
That is, I mean, it's a universally frustrating experience, and it happens to almost everyone.
It really does. All those hours of studying just vanished.
You have all the data filed away in your brain, but the retrieval system just entirely shuts down when the pressure is on. It feels like a massive personal failure in the moment.
It does. You walk away thinking, I guess I'm just not naturally good at this.
Which is so far from the truth.
Right. And that is exactly why today we are taking a deep dive into some truly fascinating material focused entirely on language acquisition. Specifically, why English learners, or really anyone learning a new language, struggle so much to speak automatically.
And more importantly, how to actually fix it.
Yes. So our mission for this deep dive is to decode the brain's internal freezing mechanism and reveal 5 daily habits to completely rewire how you process and produce a new language.
It is such a critical mission because that freezing sensation you felt in the cafe, it isn't a personal failure at all.
Right.
Not at all. It's a mechanical issue in how we are asking our brains to process information in real time. We're basically demanding that our brains perform a highly complex cognitive task without having built the underlying physical infrastructure for it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because most learners assume their problem is simply a lack of vocabulary.
Right.
Or bad grammar.
They think they just need more words.
Exactly. They think, if I just knew more words, I wouldn't have frozen in that cafe.
Yeah.
So they study more rules, they watch more instructional videos, they memorize longer lists of vocabulary.
Only to find themselves in a real conversation, constantly pausing, stumbling, and frantically translating in their heads all over again.
What a nightmare. So what's actually happening?
What's fascinating here is that the real issue isn't a lack of knowledge at all. The knowledge is in there. The problem is that the brain simply hasn't been trained for automatic production.
Automatic production.
Yes. We tend to treat language like a written math test, where we have to consciously calculate every single variable. We think about the subject, then we search for the verb, then we calculate the tense, then we check the preposition.
Oh man, doing conscious math in the middle of the chat.
Right, we're doing all this conscious math rather than treating language like a physical reflex.
But why does the brain default to that math test mode when we already know the words?
Because of how working memory operates versus procedural memory. Think about the very first time you sat behind the steering wheel of a car.
Oh boy.
Every single tiny motion requires a heavy, conscious cognitive load. You're actively thinking, check the mirror, adjust the seat, place my hands at 10 and 2, apply a very specific amount of pressure to the gas pedal.
I remember just overthinking every single turn of the wheel.
Exactly. Do you remember how exhausting those first few driving lessons were?
Absolutely terrifying. You are hyper aware of everything. If someone in the passenger seat even tries to talk to you.
You have to tell them to be quiet.
Yeah. Because you literally cannot afford the mental distraction of holding a conversation while trying to merge into traffic.
That is cognitive overload. Your working memory is completely maxed out just handling the mechanics of the car.
Wow, okay.
But eventually, with practice, the brain hands those tasks over to the subconscious. It moves from working memory into procedural memory. Today, you probably drive to the grocery store, and when you park, you barely even remember the drive itself. That's so true. I don't even think about the brake pedal anymore.
Your foot just does it. Language works the exact same way. When you are constantly pausing and translating, you are still in that overthinking the steering wheel phase of driving.
Ah, I see.
The goal is to get the brain to hand the language production over to the subconscious so you can just drive.
Which brings up a really interesting point about children. Because kids don't translate their first language.
They can't. They don't have a native language to translate from.
Exactly. They simply hear the language being spoken around them. They start to recognize the patterns. And over time, speaking just becomes completely natural. They skip the math test entirely.
For a long time, the prevailing wisdom was that adults just lost this magical ability once they passed a certain critical period in childhood.
But that's not true, right?
Cognitive science shows that is fundamentally untrue. Adults can achieve this exact same automaticity. The adult brain is still perfectly capable of building those subconscious pathways.
So what's stopping us? Adults just need the right habits to stop their highly developed brains from overanalyzing and getting in their own way.
We basically have to trick our overly intellectual adult brains into relaxing. And that brings us to the 5 habits of automaticity we are exploring today. Habit 1 is a brilliant place to start.
It really is.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The first habit only requires 5 minutes a day, but there is a major catch.
You absolutely must keep it simple.
Yes. We are talking about speaking simple sentences daily, out loud. Things like, I am drinking coffee, or I am studying English.
Just incredibly basic structures.
But wait, isn't that totally frustrating? If I only practice speaking in simple sentences like, I am drinking coffee, won't I sound like a toddler when I actually have to speak in a business meeting?
A lot of people worry about that.
Right, because my thoughts are complex, so shouldn't I be practicing complex sentences?
That is the exact trap that keeps adult learners stuck. Yes. An adult wants to express complex, nuanced thoughts because they are a complex, nuanced person. But if you constantly try to construct perfect, highly complex sentences right out of the gate in a new language, your brain naturally slows down.
Because of the math test.
Exactly. It has to stop and check all the grammar rules.
Uh-huh.
Did I conjugate this right? Is this the right preposition for this abstract concept?
And that conscious checking is what causes the hesitation.
You're trying to do advanced maneuvers before you've mastered driving in an empty parking lot?
It's like trying to do a complicated spinning skateboard trick before you've even learned how to balance on the board while moving forward.
And you just end up falling over and scraping your knees?
Exactly.
Practicing simple sentences repeatedly trains the brain to respond faster at a baseline level. It's about building that automatic reaction reflex without the heavy cognitive overload.
So you're drilling the basics until they're unconscious.
You're teaching your brain the basic rhythm of the language so deeply that it doesn't need to consult the rule book to form a subject-verb-object string anymore. You build the foundational infrastructure.
And then what?
Once saying something like, I am watching a video becomes totally effortless, your brain suddenly has the free cognitive bandwidth to start adding complexity later.
Okay, so we keep it incredibly simple to build the baseline reflex. But what are we actually talking about when we do this?
Yeah.
We can't just sit in an empty room saying the sky is blue for 5 minutes.
No, that would be incredibly boring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to habit 2.
Yeah.
Describe your daily life.
Yeah.
The technique here is to narrate your life out loud as it is happening.
Right.
So you wake up and you actually say out loud, I am waking up. You go to the bathroom, I am brushing my teeth. You pour a glass of water, I am pouring water.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason this is wildly effective comes down to how memory and physical association work in the brain. When you do this narration, you're forcing your neural pathways to directly link physical actions and real-world sensory contexts to the English words.
So you're pairing the physical sensation, like the smell of the toothpaste or the cold feeling of the water, with the actual English phrase.
By doing this, you're effectively cutting out the middleman.
The middleman being your native language.
Precisely. Think about the normal process for most adult learners. They see a toothbrush, their brain pulls up the word in their native language, and then they consciously translate that native word into English.
Which takes time.
It takes a lot of time. By narrating your life out loud as you do things, you're bypassing that translation step entirely. You see the toothbrush, you feel the toothbrush, and the brain is trained to immediately supply the English words.
You are wiring the new language directly into your physical reality.
Exactly.
I can see how that bypasses the translation lag, but I have to admit, talking to yourself out loud while making breakfast feels a little awkward.
Oh, it absolutely feels strange at first.
Mm.
You might feel a bit silly narrating your morning routine to an empty kitchen.
Right.
But the neurological benefit is immense. You're creating an immersive environment for yourself without having to travel to an English-speaking country.
But what about when we aren't at home alone? What about when we're sitting on a crowded train or at our desks at work and we can't just speak out loud?
That leads us perfectly into habit 3.
Which tackles what I think is the ultimate hurdle for anyone learning a new language, the internal monologue.
The internal monologue is a massive barrier. If your goal is to speak automatically, you have to stop thinking in your native language. The voice inside your head has to switch over.
How do you even force your brain to do that?
Yeah.
It feels impossible to just flip a switch and demand that the voice in my head suddenly starts pondering life in a different language.
Well, you don't start by pondering life.
No.
No. You don't try to philosophize or solve complex work problems in the new language. You start with tiny, small ideas.
Give me an example.
You literally just label objects in your head as you walk down the street. Car, tree, dog.
Okay, that's manageable.
And then you graduate to two-word thoughts. I'm hungry, too hot, work later.
So keeping it just as brutally simple as the spoken sentences we talked about in Habit 1.
Exactly.
But why is it so important to change the internal thought first? Why can't I just think my complex thought in my native tongue and then translate it on the fly?
Because translating thoughts from a native language is the ultimate speed bump for your brain.
How so?
If you think a complex thought in your native language, your brain has already committed to that specific linguistic architecture.
Okay.
It's chosen the idioms, the sentence structure, the cultural context of your native tongue. Forcing the brain to then pivot, dismantle that structure, and reconstruct that exact same thought into the architecture of a new language takes immense cognitive energy.
Oh, I see. It's like writing an entire email, deciding it's the wrong tone, deleting the whole thing, and then trying to write it again from scratch.
Yes. It takes twice as much effort.
And it's so frustrating.
Your brain will resist it because it's so incredibly used to the comfort and speed of its native internal monologue.
Right.
But by forming thoughts directly in the target language, even very basic ones, you remove all that friction. When the thought originates in the new language, the words are already queued up.
Making verbal speaking happen is significantly easier and faster because there is no dismantling and reconstructing process required.
Precisely.
Okay, so we're speaking simply. We're narrating our lives to cut out the middleman, and we're forcing our internal monologue to shift. But where are we getting the actual words to feed all this? We can't just recycle the same 5 phrases forever.
No, you need input.
Exactly, we need input. And that is habit 4. Listen to natural English.
This raises an important question. What kind of input are we actually giving our brains?
Right, because not all input is created equal.
If you are only studying rigid grammar rules from a textbook or listening to highly scripted, painfully slow audio dialogues designed for beginners,
You're just looking at the skeleton of the language.
you're learning the anatomy, but you never learn how the language actually flows in the real world.
So the emphasis here is on listening to natural podcasts, real unscripted conversations, and stories. Basically the media that native speakers actually consume for entertainment.
The psychology behind this is vital. The human brain is fundamentally a pattern recognition machine.
We're always looking for patterns.
Desperately. It's looking for patterns in everything we encounter to make sense of the world. When you listen to natural speech, the brain starts to actively observe the patterns of how sentences are actually formed in practice.
It hears the intonation, the rhythm.
The way certain words always seem to cluster together.
So it's not studying the rules, it's just feeling the rhythm. It kind of reminds me of listening to music.
How do you mean?
Even if you aren't a musician, if you listen to a certain genre enough, you can anticipate exactly when the beat is going to drop. You don't know the music theory behind it, you just feel that it's coming.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. In neuroscience, there's a concept that neurons that fire together wire together.
Fire together, wire together. I like that.
Every time you hear a common phrase in a natural podcast, the neural pathway for that specific string of words gets a tiny bit thicker and faster.
Building that infrastructure again?
Yes. Because the brain is a pattern recognition machine, once it identifies those patterns through enough natural input, it begins to automatically predict what word should come next.
Not because it consulted a grammar rule book.
No, through statistical learning. It knows what sounds right because it has heard that pattern 1,000 times before.
Which is exactly how we learned our first language as kids. We didn't have grammar books in our cribs.
We definitely
We just listened to our parents talk until the patterns sank in. So we're absorbing all this natural English, thickening those neural pathways. How do we turn that passive absorption into active automatic speaking?
That brings us to habit 5, repeat and shadow.
Shadowing. I've heard this term thrown around a lot.
Shadowing is a powerhouse exercise. It's highly recommended for pushing a learner from intermediate comprehension into actual fluency.
For those who might not be familiar with the term, shadowing isn't just listening and repeating after a pause, right?
No, not at all.
The notes describe it as listening to a piece of audio and immediately repeating what the speaker says, almost like you're copying their voice in real time. Let's actually demonstrate this. If I am the audio playing and I say, "The coffee is really hot today," you would be right behind me.
The coffee is really hot today.
Yes. You are literally just a millisecond behind, echoing the exact words, the tone, the pauses. It feels incredibly intense.
It is an intense exercise, and it's incredibly effective because it trains your brain in 3 crucial skills simultaneously.
What are they?
First, listening. You have to hyper-focus on the incoming audio to repeat it accurately. You can't let your mind wander for even a second.
Right.
Second, pronunciation. You're mimicking the native speaker's exact sounds, intonation, and mouth movements, rather than reading a word on a page and guessing how it sounds.
Makes total sense.
And third, speaking speed. You're forced to keep up with their natural, unedited pace.
But what happens when I inevitably trip over my words after 3 seconds? Because if I try to shadow a fast-paced podcast, I'm going to stumble, get frustrated, and fall behind almost immediately.
Oh, falling behind is guaranteed at first.
Good to know.
Your brain will feel like it's sprinting on a treadmill that someone just cranked up way too fast.
That's a great image.
You'll stumble, you'll mumble nonsense words to catch up, and you will feel overwhelmed. But that failure is the actual workout.
It's building the muscle.
By constantly trying to catch up to the native speed, you're pushing the brain past its comfortable, slow translation speed. You're demanding that it operates at the speed of natural speech.
And it adapts.
Over time, that intense practice forces the brain to adapt. It speeds up the processing until the physical act of forming those words becomes an automatic reflex.
You're basically putting your language skills through a high-intensity interval training workout. The stumbling and the burning sensation in your brain means it's actually working.
That intense demand is what forces the neurological adaptation. You cannot build speed by always practicing slowly.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We have these 5 habits. Speaking simply to build the baseline. Narrating our day to connect words to physical reality. Shifting our internal monologue to avoid the translation trap. Listening to natural patterns to feed the brain, and shadowing to train our physical speed.
That's the formula.
But what are we actually building toward? We have to completely redefine our idea of fluency.
There is a massive myth surrounding fluency that holds so many learners back and causes a lot of unnecessary anxiety.
It's the myth that fluency means speaking incredibly fast, right? Using highly difficult academic vocabulary or having absolutely flawless, perfect grammar in every sentence.
Which is simply not true in reality.
No.
Think about it. Listen to native speakers of any language. They use simple vocabulary constantly. They lose their train of thought. They make grammatical errors when they speak casually.
We're doing it right now.
Exactly. The ultimate definition of fluency is much more forgiving and much more accurate. Fluency simply means speaking naturally without overthinking.
It's all about flow.
It is all about flow.
Flow. I love that word for this. It takes all the pressure of perfection away.
When the brain is deeply familiar with the patterns of a language because you've been feeding it simple sentences, narrating your life, thinking in small ideas, and shadowing natural speech, it stops analyzing every single word.
The cognitive load drops dramatically.
You're no longer white-knuckling the steering wheel, terrified of making a wrong turn. You're just driving. You just speak.
You're trusting the patterns instead of consulting the rulebook.
And that trust allows you to actually connect with the person you're talking to, rather than being trapped inside your own head doing grammar math.
This is such a refreshing way to look at it. When you look at this whole roadmap from keeping it simple to literally mimicking native speakers in real time, it really shifts the burden off of memorizing textbooks and puts it onto simply building daily habits.
It makes it achievable.
Completely. For anyone listening, if you want to rewire your brain to speak automatically, you don't need another grammar book. You need to implement these 5 habits.
Exactly.
Speak simple sentences every single day to build the reflex. Describe your daily life out loud to connect the physical world to the language. Force yourself to change that internal monologue, even just 2 words at a time.
Listen to natural conversations to absorb the rhythm.
And practice shadowing to push your brain's processing speed to the limit.
The most encouraging insight to take away from all of this is that the human brain is endlessly adaptable.
It really is amazing.
If you follow these habits, your brain will slowly but surely adapt to the new demands you are placing on it. The ultimate goal of learning any language is never about memorizing rules, it's about natural communication.
Yes.
If you stick with this, one day you will be in the middle of a conversation and you will suddenly realize that you are speaking entirely without translating.
You'll just be talking. You won't even realize you're doing it until after it happens.
That's the moment.
You'll order that coffee in Paris, and the words will just fall out of your mouth. It's a beautiful goal to strive for. And it brings us to a final thought we want to leave you with today.
Ooh.
We've talked a lot about how getting stuck in the rules prevents us from finding the flow in language. But it makes you wonder if speaking a language smoothly relies entirely on trusting patterns rather than overanalyzing the rules.
What else are we overthinking?
Exactly. What other complex skills in your life are you holding yourself back in right now simply because you're stuck in the translation phase, overthinking the rules instead of just letting yourself find the flow?
It's a powerful question to consider. The lessons of cognitive load apply to almost everything we do.
Truly. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep trusting the patterns, keep finding your flow, and we'll be right back here with more insights next time.